Imagine something unimaginable. A child who was declared dead not once, but 3 times, miraculously returns to life. But upon opening his eyes, he not only receives a second chance but brings with him a message so profound and surprising that it seems to come from a place beyond our earthly reality. A place that many of us dream exists, that we long to know, but from which we rarely hear direct accounts. This is the incredible story of Landon Whitley, a boy who ventured to the edge between life and death, crossed into the unknown, and returned with an urgent message. Landon claims to have seen Jesus, and what he told him is something you need to hear, especially if you've ever wondered about the existence of another life or what happens when we close our eyes for the last time. This story could be the answer you've been searching for. Prepare to embark on a journey that defies logic, breaks any doubt, and takes you straight to the heart of a divine mystery. Before delving into this account, if you're interested in learning more amazing stories that challenge our understanding of life, don't forget to subscribe and activate notifications. What's coming is something you won't want to miss. It all began on an ordinary Sunday in 1997. The Whitley family, like many others, valued their time together on weekends. Their routine was simple but full of meaning. They attended church in the morning, returned home to enjoy a quiet lunch, and then relaxed for the rest of the day. However, on this particular Sunday, something extraordinary was about to happen. It was an apparently normal day. Julie Whitley, a devoted mother, was chatting with her husband Andy as they drove along familiar routes back home. In the back seat, their little son Landon looked distractedly out the window, completely unaware of what fate had in store for them just minutes away. The sun was shining brightly, filling the car's interior with a warm golden light that made the journey a peaceful and routine moment. Suddenly, everything changed. The calm was shattered by the sound of a siren. An ambulance was rapidly approaching an intersection. The Whitley family had no time to react. The impact was so violent that their car was thrown and spun out of control. The sound of twisting metal and breaking glass filled the air. Julie was stunned and disoriented as the tranquility of the day transformed into a nightmare in broad daylight. When the car finally came to a stop, an overwhelming silence took over the scene, broken only by the sound of sirens growing ever closer. First responders arrived quickly, but upon seeing the wreckage of the accident, it was clear that the situation was extremely serious. The vehicle was destroyed, almost unrecognizable, crushed by the force of the collision. Inside the car, Andy Whitley had lost his life instantly. His existence ended tragically and instantaneously. Julie, trapped among the car's remains, miraculously remained alive, though seriously injured. Rescuers worked frantically to free her from the twisted metal, but attention soon focused on little Landon, who lay motionless in the back seat. He wasn't breathing. His condition was critical. Landon was rushed to the nearest hospital while paramedics fought to keep him alive. He barely had a pulse, and his breathing was shallow, signs that his body was on the verge of collapse. Despite all efforts, the unthinkable happened. Landon was declared clinically dead. The medical team exhausted all possible resources, but there was no response. It seemed that his brief time in this world had come to an end. Meanwhile, Julie, still struggling with her own injuries, received the devastating news of her husband's death. The pain hit her with indescribable force, but in the midst of that agony, she couldn't stop thinking about Landon. She clung to a small hope that somehow he would survive, even though doctors had already warned her to prepare for the worst. In the operating room, the fight to save Landon continued. His heart stopped 2 more times, and miraculously, doctors managed to revive him on both occasions. Each time his heart stopped beating, it was as if a door to the beyond opened a little more. Landon seemed to be suspended between 2 worlds, pulled by invisible forces dragging him from one side to the other. The medical team worked tirelessly, their faces reflecting a mixture of concentration and anguish as they put all their effort into keeping the child alive. It seemed they were witnessing a battle between life and death, a struggle in which Landon's soul teetered between staying in this world or crossing to the other. Overwhelmed by pain and fear, Julie prayed desperately. Her prayers were not simple words, but anguished cries directed at God, begging him to allow her to keep her son's life. She felt her faith was being tested like never before. She had already lost her husband, and the idea of losing her only son as well was unbearable. She whispered over and over, "Please God, don't take him from me." Not him. For the doctors, the outlook was grim. The chances of Landon surviving were minimal, and in the unlikely event that he managed to pull through, they feared he would suffer irreversible brain damage. After all, how could someone be declared dead 3 times and not suffer serious consequences? The situation seemed to go beyond any medical understanding, leaving both doctors and Julie facing the inexplicable. They prepared Julie for what seemed inevitable. The doctors explained that if Landon woke up, he might never be the same again. He could be trapped in an incomplete version of himself, with his memory fragmented or his personality unrecognizable. Despite the discouraging prognoses, Julie refused to give up. Deep in her heart, she was certain that her son's spirit was stronger than his fragile body. She clung to the hope that if Landon returned, he would do so as the same boy she had always loved. The days stretched into weeks as Landon remained in a coma, motionless and connected to the machines that kept him alive. Julie didn't move from his side. She spent hours sitting by his bed, holding him as if her touch could draw him back from the abyss. The doctors, although vigilant and dedicated, didn't hide their doubts. They had seen too many similar cases and knew that the outcome was rarely favorable. But Landon wasn't like other patients. His story was different. Amidst the rhythmic beeps of the monitors and the cold glow of the hospital lights, Landon's body seemed inert. However, his spirit was not at rest. Although physically motionless, his consciousness had traveled to a place beyond human comprehension, a realm that few have visited and even fewer have returned from to tell about. Later, Landon would describe his experience as indescribable. His spirit rose, detaching from his body and leaving behind the hospital room. He found himself in a place so peaceful and beautiful that it seemed like a dream, yet it felt more real than anything he had ever experienced before. There, all his senses were amplified. The colors were more vibrant, the sounds formed a celestial harmony, and an overwhelming peace enveloped him like a mantle. Landon was sure of one thing: he had crossed into heaven. He remembered walking on pathways paved with gold that shone as if radiating light from within. The warm, soft air seemed to be impregnated with love. There was no visible sun, but the entire place was illuminated by a light that seemed to come from everywhere, as if the very environment was made of light and energy. As he advanced, he saw figures bathed in a golden glow. At first, he didn't recognize all the faces, but he felt an immediate and deep connection with them, as if they had always been part of his life. Soon he understood that these figures were relatives who had passed away long before he was born. Although he didn't know them, he felt surrounded by unconditional love and a warm welcome. Among them, Landon noticed 2 small children who smiled at him sweetly. At that moment, he didn't know who they were, but their presence filled him with an inexplicable tranquility. Later, he would discover that these children were his siblings who had passed away before his birth. His parents had never told him about them, and Landon had no way of knowing about their existence. But there they were, receiving him with open arms and infinite tenderness. Then, in the midst of this paradise, a different figure appeared. Its light was brighter, warmer, and more intense than anything else in that place. Although Landon had never seen him before, he instantly knew who he was. It was Jesus. No introductions or words were needed. The recognition was immediate, and with it came a wave of love so powerful that Landon burst into tears. Jesus didn't look at him with judgment, but with indescribable compassion and affection that cleared away all fear, all doubt, all earthly pain. Jesus didn't speak with words, but his message resonated directly in Landon's soul. It was as if every thought, every feeling was transmitted in a way that transcended human language. He told him that it wasn't his time yet, that he had to return. Landon had a mission to fulfill. Jesus entrusted him with a clear and urgent message. He had to return to Earth to share a truth that would change lives. Heaven is real. Life doesn't end with death. Each person has a divine purpose, and his story should serve to inspire hope and faith in others. Although Landon didn't want to leave that place, he understood that he had to. He knew that his time there hadn't yet come and that his task was on Earth. It was a sacrifice to return to a world of pain and suffering after having known such perfect peace, but he understood that his mission was more important. In an instant, the vision disappeared. Landon felt as if an invisible force pushed him back, dragging him through a tunnel full of light and warmth. Finally, he slowly opened his eyes, dazzled by the cold fluorescent light of the hospital room. He was back. Landon had returned from a place that many only imagine, with a message that would change not only his life but also the lives of all those who would hear his story. Doctors and nurses rushed over, incredulous at what they were witnessing. After having been declared dead on 3 occasions, Landon was not only alive but fully conscious. The medical staff, still shocked, began to perform tests, looking for signs of neurological damage, memory loss, or cognitive deterioration. But they found nothing. Landon defied all odds with unexpected strength for someone who had spent weeks in a coma. He squeezed his mother Julie's hand, who, upon feeling that touch, couldn't help but let tears roll down her face. Her son had returned intact. It was a miracle that no one could explain. However, the most surprising thing happened when Landon began to speak. At first, his voice was barely a whisper, weakened by the long period of immobility, but the words that came out of his mouth left everyone speechless. Landon described a place that seemed extracted from a dream. He spoke of golden paths, of a light that didn't come from any sun, and of a tranquility so deep that it couldn't be compared to anything earthly. However, what really left Julie stunned was when he mentioned 2 children who greeted him with smiles full of love. Landon described them as if he had known them all his life, although Julie knew that was impossible. No one had ever told him about the 2 babies she had lost before he was born. She had kept that pain silent. But there was her son, detailing the appearance and warmth of siblings he had never met in this life. His certainty was undeniable, and it left her speechless. The doctors and nurses who listened to him couldn't understand it. They had seen cases of near-death experiences before, but never anything like this. Landon not only described a heavenly world, he spoke of people and details he had no way of knowing. For the medical staff, everything defied logic. For Julie, it was a moment full of mixed emotions. Her son was alive, but the loss of her husband remained a wound that the miracle couldn't heal. In the days that followed, Landon began to regain strength at a rate that surprised even the doctors. His body was healing quickly, and his mind was clearer than ever. But what most caught the attention of those around him was the change in his spirit. Landon, a curious and cheerful child before the accident, now seemed to possess a maturity and serenity that were not typical of someone his age. With the same clarity with which he had described heaven, he began to recount what Jesus had told him during his experience. "He told me it wasn't my time," Landon explained, looking directly at his mother as if he wanted his words to be engraved in her heart. "He told me I had to come back, that I had a mission. To tell people that heaven is real, and that we all have a purpose, that life doesn't end here." Julie listened with her soul full of emotions. Her son's words had a weight she couldn't ignore. It wasn't just what he said, but how he said it. There was something in his voice, a calmness and certainty that didn't correspond to a child. Landon wasn't just talking, he was transmitting something deeper, something that touched the hearts of those who listened. Soon, Landon's story began to spread, first among relatives, then among friends, and finally beyond. People from different places came to listen to him, seeking answers, comfort, or simply the hope that their own losses weren't the end. Although Landon didn't claim to have all the answers, he spoke with a sincerity that moved those who listened to him. "Heaven is a real place," he said with absolute conviction. "It's a place full of love where we meet again with those we've lost. Jesus told me to tell it, and that's what I'm doing." For Landon, the experience was a gift, but also a weight. He understood that he hadn't returned just to resume his life, but to share what he had seen. Although some listened to him with skepticism, he didn't get discouraged. He felt that his mission was greater than any doubt he might face. He had touched heaven, he had seen the light, and he wouldn't rest until everyone knew that there was something beyond this life.